Welcome everyone to our April live stream with Be Emboldened. I'm Natasha, your board chair at Be Emboldened, and today we have Tracy Brown joining us. Tracy, so glad to have you on today.
Natasha, thanks for having me. I'm super excited about what's going to come from this, and just hopefully the fruit of this. So
That's right, fruit. Well, that's perfect, right? Because we're going to be talking about food.
yeah.
So if you guys don't know, definitely check out the podcast episode between Tracy and Naomi. But Tracy is a somatic nutrition therapist, a registered licensed dietitian, and an attuned eating coach. So she knows all about food, and we're really excited to continue the conversation about the relationship between trauma and food and get to answer your questions live. So we have some questions to kick us off, but please put your questions in the chat as we go, and we'll be able to answer those and get the conversation going about this really important topic and how these two things intersect is food and trauma. So Tracy, to start us off, I just love to hear a little bit when we say somatic nutrition therapist and licensed dietitian and attuned eating coach, can you just give us your elevator speech for what does that mean and why is that important to us today?
Yeah, well, trauma can, as anybody who's ever experienced some level of like too much or not enough, disembody us, and that's for good reason. The body doesn't feel safe. The problem is, the problem with, I guess, that experience and that side effect of trauma is that we still have a human body we have to take care of. We have still have needs for sleep and food and oxygen and water and shelter. And when we get separated from that part of ourselves, we'll still have the symptoms and signals that needs care. But the longer we have been disconnected from our body's signals, let's say, so hunger, fullness, and especially if your body has felt like kind of the battle zone or the battlefield of where too much or not enough signals like fight, flight, freeze, or please, and the gut-wrenching feelings we feel or the grief we might have in our neck or chest or when our brain's swirling, the more intense it feels inside, the less we want to be there, basically. And over time, that starts to disrupt our relationship with food. So we don't really know what our hunger or fullness signals anymore. And when you intersect that with being in environments with not such a great relationship with food, aka most Western cultures, that we are very kind of fear-driven, and there's a lot of weight and body prejudice out there that makes us believe that if you're not healthy forever, or if you don't look a certain right weight or way, there's something wrong with you. Mm-hmm. And so if you've already got this initial experience of neglect or abandonment or, abuse, whatever it's been, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, all the things, the body's holding all that. Mm-hmm. And as time goes on, if you also have neglect and abuse and all bullying with your size and your food, you're going to further get out of your body and look for something outside of yourself to tell you what to do. And something that appears, it's not true, but something that appears safe, usually, which is diet and wellness culture.
Yeah.
If I have the right food, if I have the right look, then people won't hurt me, they won't reject me. So most of the time when people are manipulating their food outside of their body signals, that has more to do with fear of rejection than it does anything else. Not that it actually is going to make you healthier or happier. There's just the illusion of that because inside feels so bad and your experiences have been so bad. So you can see how I'm doing layer after layer as I'm talking. It's pretty messy. Mm-hmm. And so what we do is we help people come back home to their bodies to get signals of hunger and fullness. And actually, this is a fancy word, but interoceptive awareness is like, oh, I know how I feel inside. I can feel that sensation and I know what it means. And then of course the goal is to I know how to get that need met. So we teach people how to differentiate signals of hunger and fullness from feelings of fight, flight, freeze, or please, or emotions, and learn that those sensations, while it's important information, it's not necessarily a threat. It might be uncomfortable, but it's not a threat. So when you start to unpack that, then all the stories come up of where this started. You get some ground zero information, and healing can happen there. But oftentimes people use all the symptoms: dieting, restricting, binging, purging, orthorexic, fear of food, body image distortions, all those things are inside out issues. They're not really that people don't have enough willpower to
Yeah.
stop. They need support. So
Yeah, no, that makes a
that's
lot
what
of
I do.
sense. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, we talk about trauma and we talk about, Being Bolden offers mentoring services and support groups and ways to address these things mentally, emotionally. And It's just really great to get that additional piece of the puzzle is that we experience this trauma in our bodies and our bodies are part of that. And that's we can't ignore that. We are integrated beings, and if something happens to us even mentally and emotionally, there could be physical effects. So that's why we're here today, to talk about get more into those questions of how that works and what we need to know. So we have a question here to kick us off. How do I know I have an unhealthy relationship with food? What would some indicators be?
Yeah. I think one of the most important ones is, do you feel like that there's distress around your eating? Eating really is made to be this experience that you're hungry and you most of the time putting yourself when you're full, and you're eating based on nourishment and pleasure. And there's a sense of like completion when you eat. But if this is fraught with anxiety and I'm doing it wrong, and if I eat this, what will people think? Or if my body changes, what will happen to me? How I belong? You got some stuff going on. That's just how it is, because it's really meant to be. There's diversity in nature we see all the time. So why wouldn't there be diversity in how our bodies look, for example, or how our bodies function from someone else? But our culture is has already conditioned 3, 4, multiple, maybe more generations of people that like what you look like is kind of a signal of your morals or your work ethic or whatever it is. So yeah, if you're feeling guilt, I'll just be simple. If you're feeling guilt, if you're worried about it, those things don't naturally go with food, but they've been conditioned because of our experiences or again our conditioning. That's that people like, when I hear people say, oh, everybody worries about it, like, oh, well, they might, but that's not natural and normal. It's normal to do it, I guess, but it's not good for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Those can be some good indicators of something to pay attention to, something to check out here, not
It
just
really
ignore.
be like, oh, here's the food I have, what sounds the best,
Yeah.
basically. Or it's like, that really didn't sit right. It could be the food or it could be something else, but you look at a big picture versus people have been very trained because of our health kind of culture of like getting the food perfect too, is that like everything's the food's fault. And I'm like, or well, how anxious were you for that meal, or what's happening in the future, or what's going on. There could be other things going on, not just because you ate the wrong brand of something. Could be, but it could be other things too. But we're trained to knee-jerk go to the food first. What did I do wrong? How do I fix this? Versus, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, that's good. It's good to ask those questions. That's great. Well, if someone is in that place of maybe something is wrong, and there's something, an indicator that needs to be addressed. Someone asked, how can I begin to correct my relationship with food? How would you even start to think about that differently or do something differently about that?
I mean, everybody's relationship with food is different, so you kind of have to assess what really is my issue. Most people come to us, I would say 95% of the time, people have their own set of food rules, whether they gathered like little bits and pieces over the decades of their life, or they're following some routine that they read in a book or an influencer or something. So they've got some rules, and you'll know that you got something to work on when you break those rules. So like, I don't eat till noon, or I don't eat gluten, or I think I don't eat sugar. And you start to do it and you start to feel bad, anxious, awful, whatever. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means that there's some beliefs tied up in it that have a lot of emotions tied to it. So it's not always as simple as stop dieting, because again, 95% of the time people come to us thinking they have an emotional eating problem. And I look at their food and I'm like, no, you've got a deprivation problem. I look at their food, it's like, it might be enough calories for the day, but they didn't want to eat any of it. They ate it. They ate it in a way that didn't feel good. It's very legalistic. It's very food rule based. Or maybe they're eating enough, but they're not getting enough care all day. and they're trying to be perfect with their food to earn care, and they're also probably overworking and codependent in some area of their life. So we're really looking at all the things, and the only place they get care is they're eating. Eating doesn't bite back. Food doesn't bite back. Food doesn't reject back. Those kind of things, and it feels safe. But that happens to people. But most of the time, I look at people's food and they're under eating. To be honest, at some point in their day, or they're definitely depriving themselves of the time they like to spend with their eating in terms of the pacing of it, or just the amount or what they wanted to eat. So it's not a big shock biologically. So we're looking at really just science and common sense. It's like, oh, if your body needs a certain amount of food a day to run well, and you're only eating 50% by 3 o'clock, the predictable consequence is that your body would try to get you to catch up all night.
Yeah.
So, and then you couple that with probably being under-resourced, or feeling kind of soul hungry or connection hungry, or whatever's happening for you that day, or whatever you're going through. Your food is an easy reach because it's there, it's accessible, those kind of things. So when we start with that, you want to really look at, like, what's the opposite of all that? Well, maybe it means I need, even if it's hard, to start to eat in a little bit more contained way, not a diet or a meal plan per se, but it's like, I need to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What do I like to eat? What satisfies me? Start to ask those questions, and have the expectation you're not going to be the expert on this the first 2 weeks you do it. It's not a program. People trying to usually attend recovery and this like intuitive eating process into another program, because we're programmed to be on diet programs. Versus a process that we learn some stuff and we hold that new line and we learn some new stuff, and then we have a hard time and we come back a little bit, but not fully all the way. And it's more like this, but moving forward, than it is like day one, day or month 3, and then we're done. It's like, no, you got to reestablish a relationship. That takes time. And if you want to have a good relationship with food, you have to like be present, ask questions. Do I like this? How do I know it inside? How do I get my needs met? It's a busy day. Instead of like, oh, life just happened to me and I binge. It's like, no, not really. There's some indicators of either setting yourself up for satisfaction. You can look back and see that. And you can also look at, well, what is your mind saying about your food? Before every meal, what are you saying about your need and what you want? Most of the time, I look at their food like, oh man, those were some pretty trashy thoughts. They weren't very nice. Of like, oh gosh, I can't believe I ate that butter on that bread. What am I doing? It's like, wait, what? Who says you can't eat that?
Wow. So there's a lot of negative self-talk to combat.
It's a renewal of the mind, definitely. Of like, what are my thoughts? How do I feel about that? What I'm doing? Because it's mental and emotional for the most part. The practical is like, you show up and you get enough food and you take time for it and you keep the food in your house, and all the opposites of diets, or just neglect. A lot of people I work with have food insecurity for all kinds of reasons, whether from being forced to be on diets as a kid, or just stringent eating that doesn't make any sense. It's arbitrary, but that's what the social network was doing, or not enough food. So there's a level of like, working with that deprivation not to trigger it as well.
That's good. I don't know if it's just me, so I hope it is, but I am hearing a little, I don't know if I don't think it's feedback. It feels a little fuzzy when you're talking sometimes. So I don't know if there's anything covering your microphone or anything, but
I think so. Let me play here a little bit. You just gotta,
oh, that's all right.
You know what? Let me, hold on a second. Just get rid of there's stuff around me. I'll just turn my computer totally off and see if that helps. Okay.
Great. Okay. Yeah. And we'll just keep going. I just want to, hopefully it's just me.
Okay.
We do have a chat question in here. Our social lives revolve around food and sharing a meal. And that's something to talk about the podcast, of just how much we have to eat, and that's part of our culture, right? So do you have any advice, Tracy, for navigating food trauma when you're invited to share a meal, when you're invited into that social space?
Well, I think it's really important to get clear about, well, what are the triggers around sharing food with people? Is it the actual food? Is it the experiences? Because sometimes it's like, it's not the food we're afraid of. It's the behaviors that happen around the food. And our bodies are like, do I have to where do I have to sit to not get a side eye? Or, we want to get clear, what's the threat first? Is it actually the eating and what people think of us, or what we perceive people are going to think? That's our projection. Like here and now, people will treat us like we got treated in the past. That may not be true. That's a projection, but we need to, figure out the triggers first, then to be afraid, then to figure out like, what are my glimmers to this? What will help me feel less bad, less scared? And that can be very logistical on how you choose to eat, what resources you literally bring to the table, whether it's people, something to hold on to. If you're early in the journey, you don't have to do the hardest thing. Maybe you're doing one hard thing, but not 10. As time goes on, you're doing more challenging things, but I would need more details to be really specific, and that's what this is, such an individual process. Like, what is it about communal meals that feels hard or scary or a threat or too much? What's your body telling you? So.
Yeah. That's great. What is your body telling you? I mean, that's a phrase that I think sums up what you've been talking about. And that really ties into this next question of like, how do I find out what is the right amount of food for me or the right food to eat? Are there objective standards like the food pyramid, or like, how
Yeah.
do how do you listen? How do you know what your body's telling you is right?
Oh my goodness. So the heart of this work is we teach people how to be their own food nutrition experts. So you don't have to constantly be looking to the experts, the gurus, to tell you what to do. We have a body that will give us those signals. And even the asking that question tells me there's disembodiment. I don't know how much to eat or what to eat, because there's been a distance from that inner knowing for a long time, for probably a very good reason, right? So oftentimes we don't know at the beginning how much to eat. So we do something called mechanical eating, and that has to be set up individually, usually by a professional, because we know how to like kind of progress people to enoughness with their food and match that with their hunger fullness signals. But essentially, it's like a meal plan. Most people come to us always though thinking that they need less than what they need. Almost everybody, when I tell them, most adults, women need 2,200 calories a day. That's an average. Most men are more like 2,500 to 3,000. Some women need more. These are adult numbers, And people were like horrified and shocked. What do you mean? I was eating half that or less than half of that. I'm like, well, that's diet culture. They have dictated this is what you need to look a certain way. They don't care about your wellness. They care about you staying in the program.
Yeah.
I do call diet culture diet cult for a reason. It's not about your nourishment, your health, you even having your full mind and being embodied. It's not about that. It's about following the rules so you comply. So maybe if you're lucky, you can belong. Yeah. And so when people are really confused when I'm like, people need a lot more food than they think they need. They mostly eat the amounts that toddlers need as adults. And that's why they're having mental, physical, and emotional obsessions and side effects. Why is my hair falling out? Why am I cold? Why can I not stop thinking about my next meal? Because your brain's freaking out. That's why.
Yeah.
It's just lacking nutrition and glucose to run. So, constipation, stuff like that. Like, what's wrong with my gut? It's being starved. It can't work right.
Wow.
But they think they're healthy because they're eating less food. And again, in our culture, less body is the goal. So less food is justified, even though it's not good for us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do we know? It's like we might need to do some mechanical eating, which is, I don't know if I feel like eating right now or not, but I'm going to be eating regularly anyway until you get those. Basically, you're getting your basal metabolic rate back up so you can get more accurate signals.
Yeah.
The starvation restriction is the same thing as starvation.
Yeah.
The body doesn't know the difference. So it'll slow everything down, including, the accuracy of your signals. And then when eating is more regulated, and that can take 6 to 9 months, usually most people 9 months to a year, then it's like, oh, I know how much I need. And then along that process, we're really working on your preferences. What do you like? If you didn't care about calories, if you didn't care what people thought, what would you want to eat for breakfast? I don't know. Sometimes I have to give people, like, here are some ideas of how people eat. Here are some options. That also includes leftovers. Really kind of going back into like agency. So you can like get yourself back. Oftentimes through this process, what you can do with food, you can do with other things too, about what you think, how you feel, like get an identity, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, just what would be a reasonable expectation for someone as they're learning to do all these things, as far as like a timeline? Not to put a timeline on it unnecessarily, but just if if someone's struggling with this, is
Yeah.
it something that they should expect that maybe they can fix in a week, or is it like does this take 6 months? Like, what are
Oh my
kind of the
goodness. Well, think
averages?
about it. We are talking about not just disembodiment from ourselves, but also relationship with care. And
Mm,
most people that I work with, and I had this story too, there was a lot of mistrust of just even receiving care. Food is care.
yeah.
So most of our clients, the clients that come to us who they have some education under their belt, they understand this whole trauma, diet trauma kind of process where it's like we've been told so long what to eat, how to eat, very mind controlled with this stuff. But people who come to us with like, oh, I realize that, and I hate that, I hate my body, and I judge other people's bodies, and
Mm,
I'm working on more permission to eat, and I've just hit bottom, I had enough. Those people, they might do coaching with us, 6 months to a year, and be pretty great. Go on, go on. But most people who come to us who have a lot of complex stuff going on, and that's to be expected. It's all kind of intersected and tied up. Care is tied up with not only food, but people and all kinds of things. It takes a long time to kind of, there's like this push and pull of like gas and brake, like
mm,
connect and protect. And food goes
mhm.
along with that. So you might be doing well, and something about this getting well triggers something else of some other stuff. I mean, so I work with people as long as 6, 7 years before. I've worked with people, but typically it's like, 2 years. That's kind of typical. That doesn't mean that people come every week for 2 years, but because we are working on the relationship with food and the practical
Mhm.
of it, but also dismantling the negative, judgmental, harmful thoughts,
Mhm.
doing a lot of body image work, doing issues sometimes with intersection with health. So you might trying to recover from a disordered eating, and you have PCOS, and there's trauma, and takes time for all the stuff to get untangled from each
Yeah.
other to like, I can do what I need to do with this and with this and with this. And, you know, there's a lot of discernment there.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it can, I wouldn't think ever a minimum of a year, to be honest, but it can be multiple years. It could be shorter. Who knows? I'm not in control of that. There's other factors in play that too, but I know it's hard to hear sometimes, but it's definitely like a restoration process
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. No, I think it's really helpful, Tracy, and I can imagine that will feel daunting and can feel daunting, and the temptation is real in our microwave
Like,
culture to the quick fix, the instant
yeah,
gratification. Like
yeah,
this diet promises me that it'll fix this, when really these issues and what's underlying is so much deeper, and that's why it takes time, and good things take time. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
hope that's encouraging for someone out there too, to hear that it's worth it, that it's a process much like therapy, mentally and emotionally. Like, it can take that time, but you're working on good stuff that will take time
Well, and
to
I
move
think people sometimes, how I feel now is how I'm going to feel forever, and
mm,
that's a pretty typical trauma response too,
yeah,
right? It's like, oh, like if I feel this discomfort with this eating, like, you won't always feel that way. You're always learning. So when you do a set of, like, let's say experiments or whatever, you're growing your capacity.
mhm,
So
mhm,
to be able to handle the next layer of stuff, but you can never go back because you can't unlearn it. And you
yeah,
always have more resources now than you did 3 months ago, 30 years ago. So there's more on board to help you with
mm,
what comes up, which is
mhm,
so beautiful. Um, yeah, and I think the message here is, um, you mentioned grief.
mm,
That's huge, and that's what probably a lot of this is about. Is
mhm,
we're grieving I call it grieving the thin dream. We're grieving the whole, like, if I just was a certain way, they wouldn't reject me anymore. And it could be, it takes a lot to be different, to be honest, as well, to grieve, like, I'm going upstream with this because everybody's dieting, everybody's complaining about their bodies, everybody's congratulating people who lose weight, but you have no idea what's going on with them, and it's so inappropriate. Like, how do we
mm,
deal with this?
yeah,
Part of this process, it does build your capacity and your
mm,
resiliency to do the right thing,
mm,
even when no one cares.
yeah, that's good. That's so good. Thank you so much, Tracy. I think there's going to be times, this is a journey, like you talk about,
Yeah.
And there's going to be times where you might feel stuck. So
Yeah.
this is actually, even though it's not going to be food related, I do want to take this opportunity to talk about the Getaway. The Getaway is specifically focused on those of you who might be feeling stuck in your journey, and whether that's with food or specifically with trauma and the what you may have experienced. This is for you. So beautiful. Just picture of what is coming your way if you sign up for the Getaway, happening June 4th through 7th at Lorraine Ranch in Colorado. If retreats and getaways make your skin crawl, this is for you because this is specifically designed for people who have experienced trauma, a safe place for them to come, an intimate place where you can take the options to eat, to not eat, to join sessions, to take alone time. And it's really available there for you. So we only have 12 spots open for this entire retreat. And some of those are already taken. So once those are full, it's full. But we're going to have sessions with Naomi, with TC Cannon, with Roger Sharp. And this is really a chance to move forward and make progress in areas where you may be feeling stuck. So I'm going to throw a link in the chat to check that out. But this will be an unforgettable experience that will really help you go to the next level in your journey and not feeling stuck anymore. So the Getaway is coming in June, and that registration will close May 26th. So be sure to check that out if that may be right for you, or maybe share it if it might be right for a loved one. So Tracy, continuing on the conversation, you talked about mechanical eating. I'm curious, are there other just really practical things at home that people can do to learn how to listen to their bodies?
Yeah. Time. It's really taking the time. Oftentimes I'll have my clients in the beginning of this process, and again, they're really in it, and they want to learn. And there's a level of like, I know you spent 30 years in diet culture, spending so much time and so much effort. Can we use a little bit of that to check in once an hour? Not to be overly like navel gazing, but just to like, how am I doing? What do I need? Because oftentimes we don't recognize our hunger or fullness until it's at the extremes. Like I'm extremely stuffed or I'm extremely starving and we feel sick, and we don't recognize as a hunger signal. It's like, if you're sick, so hungry you're sick, you've probably waited 3 hours too long. And so teaching people to look for more subtle signs. Sometimes when you're thinking about food, is actually because you're getting a little hungry, not because you're being obsessive. But sometimes if you're always being obsessive, you probably need more food. or it's overcoupled with like some kind of internal state that, he's gotten so overcoupled with like doing something with the food that they just always go together. So you're learning how to like, wait, I'm not hungry. I'm just thinking about food. What else is going on? Oh, I think I'm like perpetually living this low level distress that I didn't even notice. It's not like anxiety attack level of internal sensation. It's just a little bit buzzy. Good noticing. That's not the same thing as hungry. You could be hungry and buzzy, or one or the other, but if you don't check in, you won't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's good. Yeah, just taking the time to notice that self-awareness. And that can be a journey too. Of I think in our culture of distraction, it can be hard to just sit in silence and check in.
You don't have to do it long. And that's why I say give it little bits, because a long sitting time may be too flooding for some people at the beginning. This is like, it's too much and they check out. It's too much, or they get busy to like avoid what's coming up. You don't have to do that at the beginning. The point of this is to grow your capacity. Yeah. And when you talked about your retreat, I just want to mention that we need thousands of experiences. I call it like watering this little new neural pathway of co-regulation, relatively safe enough presence of something that's either got your back or you're in the front, really giving your, not just your, like, I know they're here and I know this is good for me. Like, I know inside. And retreats like this, like, you grow that muscle in a little more, bigger dose, basically, and that's great. When you want people, either whether you do individual sessions or you do retreat, things like that, those give you like the big meals, But our job in between the times is to water those little good enough experiences, because speaking truth into what's happening right now is really helpful to like heal some of those like because with trauma, we get pretty wired to be hypervigilant and always scoping and scanning for the threat. And it may not be there, but man, if a yellow thing comes your way and yellow is a trigger, it doesn't matter if it's, your body just says, okay, get into action, either check out or run. And I try to help people, like, can you tell that what's happening right now is relatively okay enough?
That's good. And we have a whole blog post, podcast, etc. on triggers, which definitely tie into this. And so that's
totally. Food
great.
is because inside, if your body doesn't feel safe enough inside, imagine what happens every single time you need to eat a meal or snack or even drink water, go to the bathroom. If these have sensations coupled with other things that are distressing, every time you do these daily life activities, you're going to feel activated. This is, and it's vulnerable, taking things by mouth, and it's just really important to recognize that sometimes it's hard and it takes what it takes as you're building safety with just this vulnerable experience of taking in, because when you eat, now you have more contact with those unprocessed experiences. So.
Yeah, I like what you said about it. It's a vulnerable act, I mean, we do it all the time. We have to do it to survive, but just making space for that, of like what you're doing in feeding your body, and the healing you're seeking in whatever might be broken or wounded there. It's because it's so vulnerable, and it's something that you need to survive. And so it matters, and it makes sense that it's so important, and that it has such an impact in your life.
Yeah, I love, again, the word stuck. Whenever I hear that, I'm always at attention anyway in the session. We're like, okay, we're talking about trauma vortex right now, because stuck means part of me wants to go forward, and part of me is like, no, don't do it. And there's a reason for that, and people get really frustrated because they try to cognitively override that, but healing doesn't stick when you do that. It's like, no, we need to look at the part that's stuck. What's going on in there that feels too much? And that's how you work with that way more effectively, way more lovingly and gracefully, versus like trying to just plow through it. Healing won't stick there.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I love how you describe that when you're stuck, part of you wants to go forward and part of you wants to go back. And that's how you get in the middle there.
That's that crossroads where you're like, I'm stuck. And it's like, we're not stuck. We're in a vortex where it's like, I don't have enough resources. I don't know what this is. In the moment, it doesn't feel like there's anything else you can do, but do what you've always done. And we're trying to help whatever that is inside, or what is that actually about? Because when those bad things happen, those too much and not enough, it's like, we definitely don't have the resources we need. But our now time self might.
That's good. Yeah, I'm hearing my therapist in my head right now, and I think I want to say this to share this. When you feel like you're in that vortex, you don't have the resources, or you're not sure where to go. Part of you wants to go forward, part of you wants to go back. There's reasons for that, and that to give yourself grace in those moments of the part of you that's like, oh, I can't handle this, I don't want to do this, is trying to protect you in some way, or has served you in the past. And I know in the episode that you had with Naomi, she talked about that too, with her eating disorder was something that was trying to serve her in that moment. And of course, we're not advocating for that. The next thing is, well, we want to find something new that can serve you better now and not hurt you. But just not being so hard on yourself. If you have a part of you that's like, I'm not ready, I can't do this, let it be. Like it's trying to help you too.
Yeah, and that's why the process with what we do takes time, because it's like there's just a rare person that comes in like, all parts of me are like, gun head to go, I'll do whatever you say. That's usually not realistic. We have to feel the rage, the grief, the fear, and understand that like it's got a message here of protection, and it's just not those times, but it takes a lot of time to like, again, what are those new neural pathways of like, there are options now. There's agency and options now that there weren't before.
Yeah, that's good. Switching gears a little bit here, I'm wondering, in case there's anyone out there who may either be looking for support as someone who's been religiously abused, or maybe someone who is a support professional in this field of diet and nutrition. What do support providers like you, Tracy, need to know, or is helpful to know when working with a religiously abused client specifically?
When you haven't been in someone else's experience, I think it's just really important to be able to hold the space and ask a lot of questions. Obviously, not make assumptions about like how people feel or don't feel about this. Even if you have your own internal experiences, you keep that stuff to yourself, basically, until there's just room to talk about these things from a regulated way. And I don't know, I just spend a lot of time letting people share their stories and what that was like for them, and whatever ambivalence they have. And I want them to feel for me that there's room for it all here.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to be something for me.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's really good. What this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. So very practical question. How do you know, especially with all of the media saying this is what you should be, or this is what you should look like, how do you know what body type, weight, shape you should be?
Well, just like you and I'm guessing your hair is naturally brown.
It is.
Okay, mine too. So if we are going to have those features that on some level make us all kind of similar, but also very unique, why wouldn't that apply to our weight? Right? And so we have this distortion and this kind of the delusion that just because you can maybe manipulate your body size, that doesn't mean you can do whatever you want without consequences. So I can't make myself taller. I'm 4'11". I'm a very short person. And I know growing up that I had an eating disorder, but I didn't have a problem with my height. I didn't have a height disorder because it was never made, my height was never made an issue.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a problem with being kind of on the statistical edge of normal. I just like, oh, well, some people are tall, some people are short, whatever. But we don't apply that to some people are small, some people are medium, some people are large. And so that's not logical, obviously. And I know that nobody has to go out and study like genetics and biochemistry to know that like we all have a body that when we are taking care of it in a non-obsessive way, eating regularly, when I say self-care, all this means like, okay, when you're tired, you go to sleep. We all need connection. We all need to probably have some purpose. We want to live in a place that's relatively safe. When we're doing the basics, our body's going to do exactly how it's going to grow and organize exactly how it needs to be.
Yeah. Wow.
But our culture does not say that because there's no money in you being okay with yourself.
That's a quote right there. There's no money in you being okay with yourself.
There's no money in you being chill. So it's like, that's what we work towards. So it's like, we know what we're asking, something pretty radical from people is to accept the way that they were made to be. Knowing that some people, and honestly, I always try to tell people, like, the people who are ever really going to have a problem with your size are the people who have just the same, if not heightened issues. That's their projection. The majority of people on a bell-shaped curve are going to notice people, but not necessarily judge them. If they have some judgment, it's usually they keep it in their head to themselves, and it's still about their stuff. They're afraid because they've been rejected probably on this issue too at some point. And most people are in the middle that might notice you, but just there's no internal dialogue about it.
Yeah.
And then there's the other edge, it's really small too, just like the total narcissist on this one side that care, everything's about them. On the other end, it's like they don't even notice you have a body. They're noticing your orange hat. They don't care. It's just like body size is not on their radar. All right. So I think, but because there's such an emphasis, so I do honor and value the fact that there's such an emphasis on externals and size that it's hard for us not to believe that everybody doesn't think that way. But the reality is when you're around people and you're feeling like they really know you and you see you, again, it's like you forget the bodies and you're just in relationship. And we forget that fact when that latest commercial came up, or it's like, oh, it's swimsuit season. Well, there's always a season they can sell something for, right? To get you to like change your body. So that's part of the programming. So there's a level of when you've had spiritual and religious abuse that comes with programming. And honestly, that spidey sense you could start to use for this stuff because it's like, okay, what are they selling? What do they get from me thinking that my hunger's bad, or I can't control myself, or I believe that I'm addicted to sugar. Why do they want me to get there so bad? What is this?
Yeah.
Just start being curious. You have to be, because you're fine. You don't have a body problem.
That's good. That's great. I mean, that's something we talk about a lot too in religious abuse, is like asking those questions. And if someone is telling you not to ask questions about that.
Yeah, that should be your first, like, when somebody is offended if you question their diet plan or their way of doing it, it is what you think it is.
That's good. Wow. Well, Tracy, this was so great. I mean, it was great to have some questions in the chat and get people their answers. And for anyone who's watching the replay, please put your questions in the comments. We'd love to reach out to you and try to reply and respond later if we can, if you missed the live stream today. So, Tracy, just so appreciate you being on here, and just the connection between what you're doing and our organization is so important. So it's truly an honor to collaborate with you.
Yeah, I feel emotional every time I talk with you or Naomi, because it's just part of this, and it's so necessary. So I feel honored to be a resource for you guys. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we believe it too. We do believe it's necessary. And the way to get that out to other people who need to know it is to share and subscribe. So please share this content, get it to the people who need to know it, getting that word out, liking, commenting, subscribing. It really does help all the algorithms that are out there. And that's what we want. We want people to have access to this information so that they can live in freedom and live in agency and be able to ask questions and choose and be content and be chill. So please share, please subscribe to get the word out about this. Tracy, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a delight to have you on here, and we look forward to collaborating with you in the future.
Oh, Natasha, thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.